Oh, hello. So you want me to talk about the New Jersey Democratic primary for governor, huh? Okay, I'll oblige you on that. Now, this is answering a specific request to talk about the candidates for governor on the Democratic side. If people wanted to know about the Republican candidates, probably should have sent me a request for that. Welcome to the Comparison Guy podcast. Listen on Apple Podcasts. Listen on Spotify. Please follow. Please follow. We need more small, independent, silly podcasts to grow if we want varying points of view. You can't just follow the same old establishment of people and expect balance. Can't start a fire without a spark. Tell them. All right, so here's what I got for you. I have a debate between the Democratic candidates that took place roughly about a month ago. I am going to play excerpts of that debate for you. I'm going to try and keep my commentary to a minimum. I'm going to let you hear the questions, let you hear the answers. I'll chop them up a little bit, but stay with me. Don't get frustrated. I want to try and get as much to you of it as I can just to give you a taste. I'm not trying to give you a detailed idea of where every single candidate stands on every single issue. There's 6 candidates in the Democratic primary. And so it would take a 10-hour show to try and give you their answers, give you a little bit of commentary about the answers. So I'm just going to let the answers play. I'll chop them up, but take my word for it. If you feel like I'm cutting an answer off too soon, I'm probably not. If you feel like I'm not giving you as much for one particular candidate versus another particular candidate, it's only because a particular candidate gave a more substantive answer or a less canned political, type answer. So I'm going to try and give you the highlights, if you will. But once again, just to give you a taste, just to give you a little flavor of each person if you're not familiar with all of them. That's all I'm trying to attempt to do here. So don't get frustrated. Don't get mad at me. If you feel like there's something missing, you can always go and watch the debate. If you choose, I'll see if I can put a link in the description of this debate, and then you can go check it out, watch it at your own leisure. It's like 2 hours long. So that's why, as I say, if I try to play the whole thing and talk about it, it would take forever. So that's what we're going to do, all right? They covered a lot of issues, trans issues, immigration, budget issues in the state of New Jersey. The main candidates who participated running on the Democratic ticket are Steve Sweeney, former New Jersey state senator, Ras Baraka, the current mayor of the city of Newark, Steve Fulop, the current mayor of Jersey City, Sean Spiller, the current New Jersey Education Association president, Mikey Sherrill. Don't let the name fool you. That's a woman. Mikey Sherrill. She is the current U.S. House Representative of the 11th District for New Jersey, and Josh Gottheimer, who is the current U.S. House of Representative member for the 5th District of New Jersey. Oh, so those are the candidates. Here's a little info. I made some notes here on each candidate. Let me see here. Steve Sweeney. He has high name recognition in a poll. His name recognition was about 73%, and 23% of people in the poll had a positive opinion of Steve Sweeney, so not great. Ras Baraka, the Newark mayor, his name recognition was 78%. He had the highest. I believe he also had the highest positive opinion at 43%. That's Ras Baraka. He is considered progressive. That's how his ideological leanings are considered progressive. You got Steve Fulop, who's the Jersey City mayor. I believe he was next in the polls as far as positive opinion. 32% have a positive opinion. Also considered progressive, and a guy who's challenging the establishment. He's an establishment challenger, this guy. You got Sean Spiller. He was last in name recognition at 56%, and he was also last in positive opinion at 22%, Sean Spiller. Mikey Sherrill, she's the establishment candidate for the Democrats. That's the candidate the Democrat establishment likes. She does well with 65 and older voters. She led amongst that group at 40%, but she has a big drop, 30 and under, just 29%. Josh Gottheimer, he's short, all right? He's not a tall guy. It did not look good with him up there on the stage. They put him right next to Mikey Sherrill, too, the woman who next to him, she looked like she was 8 feet tall. I don't want to influence people's opinions right off the bat, but I'm going to play the clips. I'm going to give my commentary. If it seems like I'm being biased towards one person over the other, I'm not. I'm giving you what they gave in the debate. So the people who had the best answers, the people who spoke the most, the people who were the most outgoing, those are the people you're going to hear the clips from. All right? Let's get to the debate. First up, a little bit from the opening statements. I'm not going to play everyone, I don't think, but Mikey Sherrill, the U.S. Congresswoman, let's start with her.
I'm Mikey Sherrill. I have a different kind of experience, so I'll be a different kind of governor. I went to the United States Naval Academy. I served for almost 10 years as a Navy helicopter pilot. I then went on to serve again at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I've got 4 great kids, and now I'm in Congress, making sure I'm delivering for you. In fact, I've been named the most effective member of Congress from the New Jersey delegation.
Done with her. It was what it sounds like. It was polished, it was prepared, it was political. Let's move on.
Thank you. I'm running for governor because this is our chance
Sean Spiller.
to do things differently. In this state, we've seen for far too...
Done with him. Trust me. It's prepared. It's polished. It's political. We got a lot to go. We got a lot to get through here. Don't be upset. Don't be frustrated. I'm cutting these people off. You got to take my word for it. There's nothing that they're saying that you haven't heard a million times before or you will hear a million times in a commercial. All right, so let's move on.
Josh Gottheimer, you're next.
Thank you to the Globe, and very grateful to Ryder for having us.
Josh Gottheimer.
I just finished my 21-county tour of diners across Jersey, and I'll tell you, booth after booth, I'm hearing the same thing. Jersey's just too damn expensive. And families are saying to me, I want to stay here. I want my kids to be able to afford to grow up here and be able to raise their families here, but we just can't afford it between property taxes and...
That's Gottheimer's whole angle pretty much throughout the debate. Once again, U.S. representative, he's in Congress for New Jersey. He's all about affordability. He's hammering that affordability thing. Elect me governor, and I'm going to cut property taxes. I'm going to make things more affordable. Let's move on.
Ras Baraka, you're next.
The wealthy in this state have bankers, lobbyists, big law firms to represent their interests. The rest of us depend on the governor of the state of New Jersey. I don't come from a wealthy family, a big law firm. I'm not being funded by special interests with a $35 million piggy bank. I'm not getting funded by Elon Musk or SpaceX or Donald Trump's cousins and nephews or investment bankers. I'm just a regular kid from the city of Newark, a teacher, an activist, an educator who became the mayor for the last 10 years fighting difficult and intractable problems, working people's problems every single day. And I know people out there are afraid and scared because Donald Trump has been wreaking havoc for the last week, which is why we need a strong leader, a strong governor that stands strong on democratic values. We don't have the time to meander in the middle, to be mealy-mouthed or this way or that way. We can't fight extremism with moderation. So we have a chance to show the rest of the country we choose hope over fear. We choose our future over our past. We choose Ras Baraka, a strong leader, a problem solver, a Democrat for governor of the state of New Jersey.
Now, like I said, I'm being selective here. You can go listen to this whole debate if you want, but you heard most of his opening statement, if not the whole opening statement. I don't know how much I'll leave in because it came across as the most genuine. All the other opening statements up to this point were what you would expect from polished politicians who've been around. You got 2 people who've been in the House of Representatives. You got Steve Sweeney, who's been a state senator for a number of years or was a state senator for a number of years. You've got someone who's led the teachers union. Polished people, smart people, intelligent people. Ras Baraka was the only one that sounded genuine to me in the opening statements. Steve Fulop is next. Steve Fulop, the mayor of Jersey City.
I come from a family of immigrants, Holocaust survivors. And growing up, my father always told me to take the path less traveled. It's more difficult, but it's more rewarding. It's the reason after 9/11, when I was working in a prominent investment bank, I chose the unorthodox path of leaving to enlist in the Marine Corps to serve in Iraq. It's the reason when I came back and Democrats couldn't find somebody to challenge Bob Menendez, I raised my hand and said I'd do it. It's the reason in 2005 and 2013, I ran outside the political establishment to change how a council person works and how the mayor works. And Jersey City has been demonstrated as being a leader on social services, on economic issues, on criminal justice reform. I'm running a campaign to change New Jersey and to reform it. I'm unapologetic about that, and I hope you will join me on that effort.
So Steve Fulop, pretty good too. Pretty genuine. Got some good points. Veteran. Joined the Marine Corps after 9/11. Okay, let's move on to questions now. I think I'm just going to tell you the questions rather than play it to save time. The first guy asked, give outgoing Governor Phil Murphy a letter grade. How did outgoing Governor Murphy do? Steve Sweeney gave him a C. Ras Baraka gave Phil Murphy a B+. Steve Fulop gave him a C-. Sean Spiller said C+, maybe B. Both Mikey Sherrill and Gottheimer gave Phil Murphy a B.
Why would you think that Governor Murphy is a B governor?
So I think something Governor Murphy did well was to fully fund the pension system for the first time in decades. That's critically important to our credit rating, and I think it's going to make a huge difference on how we invest in the future of New Jersey.
Let me stop it right there right quick, because everybody says something about the pension in New Jersey. This is a big deal. Everyone talked about Governor Murphy fully funding the pension. For people who don't know, maybe even people who live in New Jersey who don't know, the pension system in New Jersey is a disaster. It went unfunded for decades, for a couple decades at least, by both Democratic and Republican governors. As a result, in order to fully fund the pension, $7 billion of the budget goes right off the top. Right off the top to fully fund the pension. It's about 800,000 workers, current workers, retired workers in the pension system in New Jersey, and those benefits cost the state $7 billion a year. In comparison, Mikey Sherrill mentions New York, right next door, with a larger pension, funds their pension with about $1.4 billion a year. So just think of that. New Jersey has to spend almost $6 billion more a year right off the top of their budget in order to fund the pension, because it was not funded. It was just underfunded, and therefore the interest, you understand. It was underfunded for so long by, once again, both Democrats and Republican governors, and Phil Murphy came in and said, nope, no more of that. We're going to fully fund the pension. So they all give him high marks for doing that.
I think Governor Murphy has done some good things. I think funding the pension and education has been great, and New Jersey Transit has been a failure. I give him an average grade because good leadership are people that are bold, that push boundaries. If you think about the things that he touts, cannabis, minimum wage, paid sick leave, each of those things, New Jersey was not bold. We were late to the party. By the time we got to $15 minimum wage, 10 other states were already there. It needs to be higher in New Jersey. Cannabis, we were late to the party on that. Paid sick leave. Jersey City happened to be the first to do that. So it's hard for me to give him a grade better than average in a situation where I think leadership needs to be bold and push boundaries. And I don't think New Jersey has done that over the last 8 years.
Well, I would say, while we beat up on Governor Murphy here, that most of the things he's done have been very, very difficult to do in prior administrations. Raising the minimum wage has been difficult. Paid sick leave has been difficult. Making sure that prisoners had a right to vote when they came home from parole or probation. Making sure we fight for equity, a public bank. All of these things are incredible things that could not have happened administration before that. And many of these folks were there. Were there when it couldn't happen. Were there when the ball couldn't be moved, when the obstacles couldn't be removed. They were there watching these things happen and are critical of Governor Murphy for doing the things that they couldn't get done while they were there. And so the reality is, to me, that we ought to give him what credit is due. He took us up to the door of democracy. It's our job to kick it in and go inside.
The next question has to do with a proposal to cap the amount a school district can lose from year to year at 2%. Okay? It's a question basically in regards to funding school districts. Let's listen to some of the answers.
Do you support capping the amount of state aid that a district can lose in 1 year? No.
Micah, I think these are pretty complicated issues that we should have a debate over and discuss rather than sort of an up-down. That's why we're here, and I'd love to hear from people about how we move forward the best way in our school system, and I'm happy to address people about that. I think we look around this and we've seen full funding of the school formula, but we know it's not totally fair. It doesn't put more into some of the districts that have more people with learning disabilities. For example, we know that year over year, it causes a lot of disruption as school districts get their numbers too late, so they start this mass layoff before school starts. And we know we have to take a look at the formula itself, which was done in 2008, and modernize it. So it's a good start that this administration has done in fully funding it, but more needs to be done to modernize it and to make sure, as you suggested, there aren't those shifts year over year.
Let me tell you why, though, this is an easy one to raise your hand for right away, because in too many of our communities,
Sean
for
Spiller.
our kids, and certainly for their families in our schools, you can't have a space where you reduce the aid by such an amount that all of a sudden the services that so many are relying on are pulled out from under their feet. That is not fair. That is not how anyone would budget or figure things out. And certainly we talk about the formula absolutely has to be looked at. We've got to make the modifications that were required when it was first passed. And these can account for some of the pieces here. But when we are in a system where you plan as a district and as a community for what your school budget is going to be, you're trying to meet the needs of students with special needs, and you might have reasons why those dollar amounts change for you drastically. What cannot be the solution is we're going to have it reduced at such a level that you've got students in those classrooms who don't get to take the courses they need, don't get the supports that they need to get that shot at a great education. That's not the space we go in, and that's why I think it's an easy one to answer.
So, Micah, I want to just add on to that. There's no municipality in the state
Steve
of New Jersey
Fulop.
that had a larger reduction in municipal aid than Jersey City as it relates to our schools. $250 million, and they gave us a very small runway on that. It is unfair for the reasons that I think that Sean touched on, that it forces districts to make unfair choices that impact parents. I think being a mayor and having an understanding of how municipal budgets work and interact with school budgets is an asset in this. I think what Raz said earlier is important as well, understanding and being able to hit the ground running. Anybody who advocates for a significant cut, more than that 2%, I think just doesn't understand how municipal government works.
Well, honestly, I think we need to talk about the root of this issue. The school funding formula does need to be changed and looked at. There's also too many districts, right? We have too many superintendents. We have more districts than we actually have mayors. We need to be talking about unified school districts. You can't have a district with just one school in them. There has to be at least an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. You bring these school districts together, you begin to talk about what funding looks like. You need more kids in the seats, more kids in the schools. We have to get rid of segregation and integrate our schools so kids can be in these seats and we can get more money to municipalities. That's the bottom line. You're talking about people who are losing money. They're losing money for two reasons. They have less kids, right? Or the demographic of their city has changed. It's no longer Abbott. And so we have to figure out how to fund kids with special needs, how to fund English language learners, how to fund kids that are gifted, and begin to fund diversity in schools so schools are not segregated where most of the school is predominantly white or predominantly African American. We have to figure out how to create diversity in schools.
I actually wrote S2, which is the school funding
Steve
law.
Sweeney.
And we did it for one reason. 70% of the kids were underfunded in this state and 30% were overfunded. School districts were getting funding where they didn't have the children. They weren't physically in the building. They were getting funding for. So this wasn't an easy bill. We actually did pass a bill, and it didn't, Governor Murphy vetoed it, which was saying, okay, whatever you lose, up to the dollar you use, you can raise above the 2%. But his point is raising property taxes. More importantly, schools had 15 years to shrink the size of their school districts where they didn't have children and they didn't do it. Now they're complaining about it, I understand, but what's fair is the money following the child, and we need, since I did the bill, 5 months. I mean, every 5 years you need to re-examine the formula.
Well, what about that? Can I ask you a follow-up and you can combine them together?
Sure.
So what about Senator Sweeney's idea that districts should be able to exceed the 2% cap on property taxes to meet their local fair share?
I think the bigger issue that we should talk about is not just fixing the formula, which I think is critical, as everyone's talked about, but also we need to be looking at, and I think this is critical, at what do we do to make sure that we have, as Governor Murphy talked about, all-day kindergarten everywhere in the state, but also universal pre-K. We have so many kids who are going to school who are not prepared, who are not ready. To me, this is a huge priority, and it will be a huge priority of mine as governor to make sure all of our kids have a chance to be prepared. If we invest in the front end, it pays off dividends forever, not just for them, but for our economy. It'll make our state stronger, right? And we are a great state. And we've got the best schools in the country and the best educators. We should be very, very proud of that fact. And we got to keep making sure, because people come here for that reason, that we have the best schools for everyone.
Well, not all of our schools. Some of our schools are 3 or 4 miles away from schools where half the third graders can't read on grade level. The inequity in the school district resembles the inequity in this state, right? The reality is the social determinants that make it difficult for kids to start school early, like having quality housing at a cost that they can afford. You can't get money from Blackstone and BlackRock, who driving prices up in the markets, making it difficult for people to buy housing, driving homelessness up 24% in the state, and they say you want kids to start school ready to learn. They have to be able to start school in a home with a roof over their head and food in their belly in order to start school ready to learn. Universal pre-K is right, but before we get to universal pre-K, we need to be talking about how do we put kids in seats. The seats are empty because these districts are segregated and they're by themselves. We need to widen those districts, join them with other districts, and fight desegregation in this state.
I think everyone here has to agree pre-K is extremely important. I would tell you we need to take it down lower, to a lower age, because there's been proof children do so much better. My daughter was 2 pounds when she was born. She has Down syndrome. She did early intervention. My daughter, who had Down syndrome, was learning as a baby. 85% of your brain develops from birth to 5 years old. The sooner we can get these kids, the better they are. In their studies, these children are more prepared for life. Their 20% score, their test scores are 20% higher. And Governor Murphy should be given a ton of credit for expanding pre-K, which was only a dream when Senator Ruiz and I was talking about it in 2015. Governor Murphy actually made it happen, and I can't thank him enough.
It's going up. It's great. It's great. It's going up.
Well, I have to recognize it, man. Hey, good is good.
I wanted to say we agree on universal pre-K, and we agree, and hopefully it's a good segue on desegregation of the schools to talk about housing and how that is part of the conversation as it relates to desegregation. I want to say also on the school funding formula, all of us will agree that it needs to be changed. But the problem in Trenton is when you put the formula forward and it's undermined by the politics. So when somebody reduces their funding or they have a reduced amount of funding and political people complain and is reimbursed the following year, it undermines the integrity of the entire equation. And I think that's part of the problem in Trenton that needs to change.
I'll let you go.
After you.
You guys are being so kind to each other.
Yeah.
We like each other.
I'm helping them out, man.
We like each other.
The reality is, ultimately is based on the people in charge and how they see the problems that the folks in New Jersey have. I don't think they see the majority of the folks in New Jersey. That's why they're interested in making laws or making policy with a few people, because they don't see the issues that we have. Most people in New Jersey are invisible to these folks. That's why we're arguing about should people who make $500,000 or more get a tax break when most working families don't. That's why we're saying we should put abortion on a referendum, and not just saying that, but also talking about equity. The fact that African American women die 7 times more in hospitals than anybody else. It don't matter how great the bill is if we don't have access to health care, if we don't have access to the same resources that everybody else has, then it doesn't matter at all. And yeah, schools are the same in certain neighborhoods, in certain communities. The reality is the people in power are making decisions that do not affect the majority of the folks in this state.
Here's a question. I'll play the question. It wasn't necessarily directed at Ras Baraka, but he jumped on the opportunity to answer it. So here's the question and the answer.
Follow-up. Mayor, I want to ask you a follow-up. What can New Jersey do to empower communities that have been disinterested in the process in order to have them vote more often and have them more engaged in what's happening in their communities?
They have to see themselves in the policies that are created. If I took a picture of this room, the first person you look for in the picture is yourself. If you don't see yourself, then it becomes less interesting to you. Then you begin looking for people you know. If you don't see people you know, then you might put the picture down because it doesn't engage you. It doesn't have anything to do with you. These policies that are created in the state, don't resemble the majority of the people of this state. It resembles a slim margin of folks that we debate and that we argue about all the time. Let's be honest. Like, we can talk about who's the boss, and some people are mad because they ain't the boss. But the reality is the same thing as with money. You can't not raise your own money and then have a $35 million piggy bank, or get money from huge investment bankers, or get money from military contractors and all these folks, and don't believe it'll have an impact on these elections, have an impact on your decisions. That's just not true. So the reality is, yeah, we need to create policy. We need to talk to people. We need to go to bars and barbershops and beauty parlors and get folks involved in our elections. But ultimately, we need to make sure we're raising money from the same people we're going to get our votes from. Why? Because we can't get our votes from one side of the community and our money from another side of the community and expect our policies to match.
Uh-oh. I'm cutting it out. This is the first point of real contentious in the debate. You heard Ras Baraka say something about a $35 million piggy bank. He is referencing Sean Spiller. For people who maybe live in and around New Jersey, you might have been seeing a lot of advertising for Sean Spiller that started a long time ago. That is because he's funded by the New Jersey teachers' unions. So he's gotten a ton of money to put himself out there, and Ras Baraka is making the point. Hey, look, if you got $35 million from a special interest group, you have to be aligned with that special interest. So if you got money from the military contractors, if you got money from Wall Street, whoever, if you're not getting money from the community, if you're not getting money from New Jersey voters, well, the interests are not going to align with the interest of New Jersey voters, is the point that Ras Baraka is making. Sean Spiller took the opportunity to respond to that, and I'll let you hear it.
You know, I say this, though, because I heard the mayor just note this. I heard him say it, like, allude to it at least a couple times here.
No, I said it
as
twice.
As a former educator.
I didn't allude to it.
Yeah, well, you know, and as an educator, former educator, I think you'd know this, right? I'm really proud about the fact that we've got educators in this state, hardworking folks who've come together, voluntarily joining a union, saying, hey, listen, we all know who's in those back rooms making the decisions, and we know it's not us. That's why we want our voices out there. That's why we want to make sure we can pool our dollars. They'll never compete with the Elon Musks and the other millionaires, billionaires, Wall Street, big oil. You go down the line. But we know that the only way we have at least a chance of being in the conversation and having our issues front and center is by making sure we engage in the process.
But we don't want to get rid of the king
$5,
and make another
$10,
king.
and everything at a time.
I don't want to get rid of the king and make another king.
Listen,
I'm
if you,
opposed
as
to
you
kingdoms.
said,
We won the war. The British lost. We have a democracy.
When we're trying to represent the people, Mayor, it's important that we're understanding that those who are funding, I couldn't agree with you more, matter. And when you're funded by hard-working folks in this state, I'm really proud of all the small dollar donations from so many working class folks in this state. That matters, yes, because that's who I'm going to fight for on every.
Sean Spiller and Ras Baraka do not appear to like one another. Let me just put that out there. Let's move on. Oh, by the way, the two black candidates running in the primary, not that should matter to you. What are you, racist? So you got two black candidates, you have a woman, and then you have, three? So you have three white men in the Democratic side. The Republican primary is 4 white guys. I mean, not that matters, not that it means anything, but that's what it is. And the Republican side is 4 white guys. So clearly the diversity edge goes to the Democrats. Let's move on. This guy had the nerve to ask about codifying abortion in a Democratic primary debate. What do you think they all said? But let's listen to some of the answers anyway.
Congresswoman Cheryl, you mentioned codifying legalized abortion rights into the Constitution. Is there anybody on this stage who doesn't think there should be a referendum to put that in as a constitutional matter?
I called for it. I called for it in my campaign when I announced it. We codified it legislatively, the law in New Jersey. We absolutely have to protect a woman's right to choose.
So I want to say I agree with that totally, and we should codify it. I think that we should be thinking about Senator Teresa Ruiz's bill as well, her package that talks about equity, that talks about making sure not only do we codify this as law, but making sure that people have access to those resources, that we can't have a healthcare system that's unequal, where some people enjoy the benefits and the privilege of a democracy that's been established in the state and other people cannot because they don't have access to it. Talk about working class families, black and brown families, people in the state of New Jersey who live next to hospitals and can't afford to go into those hospitals, or who live in rural communities who don't have access to hospitals directly in front of them. We have to add that to the bill as well. And so we can't see a few people, we have to see the majority of the people in this state, or all of the people in this state. We can't leave black, brown, and working families, working women out of this, particularly since African American women die 7 times more in the hospital giving birth than anybody else.
The state budget under Governor Murphy has increased by 61%. If the same thing happens during your tenure, our state budget would grow to more than $90 billion.
Question from a student.
Do you think that will happen while you're governor? And if not, what are the major areas of state spending you'll cut?
Thank you. And it's a great and really important question. You're right. The spending keeps going up. And the challenge we're having for people is, do they really feel like they're getting 60% more for their money? Mentioned about Jersey Transit, right? In the summers, their trains are late or canceled altogether. And you look around, childcare costs in the state, second highest in the country. People are struggling. So what we need to do is actually run a more efficient government. Part of what I focused on as part of my tax cut plan at joshforjersey.com is how we're going to cut property taxes, give people a break, seniors a break, and break on rent to help deal with affordability, but by doing it in 3 big ways to actually pay for it, because my plan is fully paid for. 1, we got to make sure we stop letting New York rip us off. They're totally ripping us off, right? They $1.4 billion a year, our taxpayers ship to New York, because if they work from home, but work for a New York company, if they work from home in Jersey, they're paying income taxes there. We can save 5% on making our government more efficient, like things like procurement, how we buy stuff. It's sitting out there. We can do it, especially given how much more we're spending. We certainly can save some money. And third, we got to get more money back from the federal government to Jersey. We can do that too. Yeah. We can make things more affordable here in Jersey.
That was Josh Gottheimer answering a question on how to reduce spending in New Jersey. And at the end there, you probably couldn't really tell or hear it, but Ras Baraka actually laughed out loud at him when he talked about getting money from Washington. And Steve Sweeney refers to it. Ras Baraka goes back to it, basically saying, if you think you're getting money from Washington, D.C. right now, where the heck have you been? You are not going to get money from Washington, D.C. right now to help with New Jersey's budget. Steve Fulop, the mayor of Jersey City, he gives an answer on how to reduce spending or the budget issue in New Jersey by saying he thinks you need a mayor. A mayor understands how to budget. So let's listen to his answer a little bit.
Yeah,
can I just say, look, I think this is a place where being a mayor and understanding how municipal government interacts with Trenton is a huge asset. If you look at the last 8 years, whatever you grade Governor Murphy, he came from being the ambassador and didn't have municipal experience. And prior to that was 8 years of Christie, who didn't have municipal experience. And prior to that was 4 years of John Corzine, who had no municipal experience. I think understanding it from a mayor standpoint, you do understand the fact that we constantly have from Trenton unfunded mandates. They tell us, do this is well-intentioned, you should do that, and they don't help us with any resources for that. I think that needs to be the starting point on visiting how Trenton interacts with municipal government. The second thing is the budget process needs to reform. The way we introduce budgets is January, February, and sunlight cleanses it. It happens for several months where the public gets to scrutinize it. What happens in Trenton is it gets introduced 2 days before it's passed. And that is at the core of the problem of getting reductions there.
So I think we need a 3-year forecast of what the budget looks like. We can't use voodoo economics. We can't make Mexico pay for our bills like New York. We can't do that. We can't build the efficiency government like Donald Trump wants to build. But ultimately, we need to lower costs. And one of the highest costs is healthcare, right? We need to lower healthcare costs by reference-based pricing. That's what we need to do immediately, right? We need to, if we just reduced it to 150% above Medicare, right, we would save over $1 billion over 2 or 3 years in the state. Yeah, our costs are high. Our spending are high. We gave millionaires a tax break from 2010 to 2022 in the tune of $15 billion. Of course, we don't have any money because we've let the wealthy get away. We've taken from the poor and we made the middle class foot the bill. That's what's happening. And people are beating around the bush trying to make this continue to happen. And so, yeah, we do need to rein in spending, but we need to rein in costs by lowering costs, making the wealthy pay their fair share here and be more efficient.
Oh, there's the progressive.
We cap prices on hospitals, that we cap spending on insurance that we have to pay over and over and over again to rise costs. We're not selling pies out of back of the state government. So our revenue comes from taxes. And if we don't lower the bill, the taxes don't go down, the costs don't go down. If the prices go up, we're going to be paying more. Reduce prices, reduce costs, make spending efficient.
Steve Sweeney.
We have to completely overhaul the procurement process. I was proud we created a bill on reverse auctions for PBMs. We saved $2.5 billion over 5 years. It's a bill that I did to make sure we're getting the best bang for the buck. Procurement has to be looked at every 3 years. A budget process absolutely has to be reformed. So we work with the legislature, not against the legislature. I'm the one candidate up here said I'm willing to give up authority as governor to come up with a better process. And we should dedicate all this revenue for the purpose that it's been raised. Because what happens is money is raised for a certain purpose, and then after a year or two goes into a black hole. We need to stop spending more. We need to live within our means.
You know, I think we have a really complicated future. And in fact, many people have said to me, why do you want to run for governor? Because the bill's going to come due in 2026 when you take your seat. And that's because I want to bring new leadership and fresh ideas to Trenton. We can drive in federal money. I've driven in over $50 billion, including for funding of the Gateway Tunnel project, including for making sure we're funding flooding in my district, making sure we're flooding mental health issues. I'm sure all of the mayors up here have appreciated the federal money we've driven into this state to fund many of the things that they most care about. That's really important, but we've also got to address and attack the state budget system, which is going to involve an independent auditor for our state health insurance program. It's going to involve making sure that we have more transparency. We're going to have to make sure that we have people paying their taxes like we did in Congress when we funded the IRS. And finally, that's not where it ends on affordability. We have got to build houses in this state. We are not going to make New Jersey more affordable if we don't make housing more affordable. And that's why I've driven in federal ideas for repurposing commercial properties. We can look at Harrison and what they've done on the waterfront, making sure that we are utilizing places like Trenton and Atlantic City and spaces that can really build more. Because as you just heard, there are unfunded mandates coming from Trenton, and too often it's for sewering systems that towns don't have, for example. We need to come up with innovative ideas as we look to drive down costs for New Jerseyans.
Thank you very much. I just want to add one point, because several people are talking about how they want to raise taxes, or that we can't do this, that we can't get costs down, that we can't lower taxes for folks. This is a problem we can solve. We can't throw up our hands and say we can't do this. We can solve this problem, right? We can make housing more affordable. We can build more housing and make sure we actually get more supply out there for workforce housing, for senior housing, to help families.
That's Gottheimer. I don't know who he's talking about. Nobody said we can't do this.
I couldn't agree anymore, Josh. But with all due respect, expecting more federal money from this administration is a pipe dream when they're trying to clear it back. We got to fix our own problem, because Washington is not going to help us. You know, Washington, we introduce lots of bills, we make lots of promises, and it doesn't happen. I'm not blaming the members up here. I'm just blaming Washington itself. We cannot expect Washington to bail us out. Unlike Washington, where they just say, hey, leave the mint work overtime, print more money, and what's the deficit, 30-some trillion dollars? We have to balance a budget year in and year out. It's a different animal.
But we could do both, Steve, right? You would agree? We could fight to get more money back to Jersey, cops, for firefighters. And by the way, those are dollars we get back when we fight for it. And you can do both.
Josh, I agree.
We can do both.
We can absolutely fight for it. But knowing what's going on in Washington right now, please, you're both in Congress, bring it back. I'll cheer you both on when it comes.
All right, I got to get going here because I have two issues left that were pretty good discussions. One was immigration, and the other was trans issues, LGBTQ. So let me move on and start to get to the end of this with those two issues.
So as evidenced by an ICE raid in Newark last month, Donald Trump's administration is clearly going to follow through, or at least try to follow through, on its promise of widespread deportations of undocumented immigrants. So this is going to be a loaded question, but we're going to have time to talk it through. Raise your hand if you believe that one of the goals of the next governor should be protecting immigrants in New Jersey, even those who are here illegally.
We should protect everyone.
We should protect people in New Jersey, especially with the Constitution.
I'll go to Mayor Baraka to expand on that, given that it's your hometown.
Well, it's interesting that we keep saying that people are here illegally when we keep moving the goalposts. If we take away all of the reasons or ways that pathways that people become documented citizens of the United States and then say they're illegal is a problem, right? We cannot risk the Fourth Amendment, the 14th Amendment to push this political agenda that Donald Trump has, really based in white supremacy and racism. That's really what it's based on and nothing other than that. The reality is we have to protect our neighbors. We have to protect the folks in our community. Immigrants in New Jersey represent almost a quarter of the labor force here in this state. They bring billions of dollars to state and local taxes. They increase the revenue and the economy where we live. Immigrants in our community in Newark are store owners, right? They're business owners, they're community people, they're advocates, they're part of nonprofit organizations. Defending them and standing up for them is defending and standing up for the rest of New Jersey and American families. And I'm gonna do that no matter what it takes.
As an immigrant, I think immigrants, can be in all those spaces and governor of New Jersey. But I say this, when I look at it as a parent, right, and I see the most powerful person in the world who's deciding that what he's going to do is send heavily armed folks into our schools, to kick down our doors, to come into our classrooms, to pull 7-year-olds out of their seats, to tell them that they're not going home today or they're not going to be.
I think that's what's missing in the conversation so many times is basic humanity, and we desperately need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to make sure people have a pathway to citizenship, who are here, who are working hard, who are paying taxes, DACA recipients, TPS recipients, and we also need better border security. We need to know what's coming across our border, whether it's the precursor chemicals for fentanyl and where it's coming from, and we need processing. Because there are a lot of people here who are on parole just waiting to get processed through the system, and they could be picked up and deported while they're just waiting for their court date. So we need to do better, and it starts with comprehensive immigration reform.
Yeah, well, let me just say that there are people on this stage that have been reluctant to support or say that they support immigration. I've been unapologetic in support of the Immigrant Trust Act, and I think my track record in Jersey City is second to none. We are the only nationally accredited immigration office in a municipal building in the country that we started. We've been at the forefront of the refugee program in Afghanistan and Ukraine. I'm passionate about it as a family of immigrants. Let me give you a personal component, because I do know what Raz said is accurate, that when people see these faces on TV with the handcuffs and the ice jackets around them, they say, aha, that person should be thrown out. He's definitely a criminal. Well, I'll tell you, last week in Newark, part of the raise was my father's building. My father has been in Newark for 50 years. My father is a citizen. 20 ICE agents showed up searching every single apartment. Who lives in that building? A public school teacher, a veteran, an immigration services business, and an electrical contractor with the state of New Jersey. They searched, they arrested nobody, but the next day, one of the tenants asked to move. Now I ask you, I'm running for governor. I'm up here as a candidate.
With Donald Trump, we all should stand and oppose what Donald Trump's doing. He's breaking the law. He's doing it illegally. He's doing it without legal search warrants. It's horrible what he's doing. But I also believe someone that's a criminal comes in this country and someone that breaks the law in this country shouldn't be in this country. It's a privilege. And by the way, I support what President Barack Obama and Senator Joe Biden did, which both of those presidents happen to be Democrats, deported more people than Donald Trump ever did. But they did it with humanity and compassion, and they did it the right way. So, look, we don't want to round up people that haven't done anything wrong, absolutely. But people that have broken the law in this country, I'm sorry, they need to leave it.
These are about people. We should fix the bigger problem.
So, Congressman, do you guys support the Immigration Trust Act? That's what I would ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say we have to be honest up here, number one. You can't say you support immigrants in New Jersey, but vote for the Laken-Riley Act. You can't do that. You can't say that you support immigrants and don't support immigration trust bill in New Jersey, right? We need to stop having this conversation about people being murderers and killers and rapists and criminals. We know that's a lie. There is no crime wave of immigrants in New Jersey. I'm in Newark, the state's largest city. We've reduced violence by 61%. If I solved for immigrant crime, we would almost have no crime in the city of Newark if we got rid of everybody else's crime and just let immigrants and a crime that happens in the immigrant community, they're 4 times more likely to be victims of crime than commit crime. It is wrong to sit up here and have a debate about crime that immigrants create, which we know is not true. The reality is the crime is making sure people don't have access to the American dream because of what they look like, the country they come from, the language that they speak, and the zip code that they live in. We know that's what's happening, and we have to stop it now.
So, Congressman, I do want to ask you about the Laken Riley Act. You were the only New Jersey Democrat in Congress to vote for that bill. I mean, what's your justification for that? Given
if you are a murderer, a criminal, a rapist, if you're breaking into people's homes in the middle of the night with a gun while the kids are sleeping, and you're undocumented, you shouldn't be here, right? And you shouldn't be in this state, you shouldn't be in this country. However, what the big focus on of and again, what I said before, what Donald Trump is doing by rounding people, innocent, undocumented people up and going to churches and schools, right? And going to restaurants and rounding them up, that's unacceptable. And the governor, and when I'm governor, I'm gonna do this, use the full force of the state to stop it. Right, and that's the key.
The great thing about the United States is we have a Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States, right? The reality is people come here because of the Bill of Rights, because of the Constitution. I've read somewhere that you were innocent until proven guilty. Nobody agrees that a murderer we have laws that convict murderers and a judge will decide if you stay here or go or whatever it is, but you cannot convict people just by accusations. We came here to prevent that from happening. My family traveled from the South and the Carolinas fleeing Jim Crow to find democracy in Newark, and millions of people from around the world came to the port city, the second largest in the nation, to find democracy and opportunity and the Constitution of the United States. We can't allow it to be eroded by sick individuals and then justify that because they'll come for them in the morning, they'll come for us in the evening.
Mayor Phillip, I know you wanted to.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that sentiment that you are innocent until proven guilty in this country and you're entitled to due process. And I use my family as an example. There were no warrants, there was nothing. They just searched apartment after apartment. And so I think
you know, we're talking about this bill in the State House that's going to make a difference. This is all federal. Everything about this is federal government. They don't have to work with us. They're breaking the laws and we should hold them accountable. But again, and to Josh's point, they had a bill. Trump blew it up. But we can pass all the bills you want. It's not stopping these guys. We got to make sure we make a change nationally in order to stop this nonsense. It's not right for people to be able to go without search warrant. It's wrong.
So good discussion on immigration, what you would expect from a Democratic primary. Let's move on to trans issues.
So I brought up immigrants in New Jersey in my prior question. Another group that the new Trump administration has clearly shown interest in targeting is transgender Americans. If Republicans in Washington were to get all of their goals passed, it would mean that transgender Americans would be limited in their ability to change their gender on federal documents, to join sports teams that match with their gender identity, to do all sorts of other things. I want to ask about that last policy in particular. In New Jersey K-12 schools, do you think that transgender kids should be allowed to play on sports teams that match their gender identity rather than their sex at birth?
Yes, and I'll say this, I think often we have this conversation and we want to disconnect the person from a policy or the thing we're saying. At the end of the day, I'm in our schools all the time. I'm a teacher, right? And I understand that our most important charge is making sure every student feels safe, supported, encouraged, and that they can go on and be successful people, right? And serving in our economy and our nation. And look, as a former hockey player too, I also know that, guess what? The vast majority of the kids who are playing sports or doing other things, you're not going Division I, you're not going pro, but what you are doing is you're learning. You're learning about how to support one another. You're learning about the values that can maybe help you succeed as a person as you grow older. You're benefiting in so many ways that at so many early ages to say to folks, listen, we're going to deprive you of that opportunity and ability. We are not even going to recognize you or see you. We're already going to take a group that is the most at risk and say we're going to even make things worse for you and harder and more challenging. again, I go back to our values. I don't think that's who we are. I don't think that's who we are, even as we have conversations more broadly.
Mayor Phillip and then Congresswoman Sherrill.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. And look, Jersey City has a track record on this, besides being one of the largest LGBTQ communities in the state of New Jersey. In 2018, before the trans conversation was even a conversation, we extended coverage in our healthcare in Jersey City to the trans community for the reason that we had 3 trans employees, because we thought it was the right thing to do. Now, you have an administration in Washington that is vilifying the trans community, and nobody is standing up for them. There are people here that have had questionable votes as it relates to standing up for the trans community. If you understand that the trans community is subject to higher suicide rates, higher depression rates, higher drug use rates, you would understand that if you are arguing for the most vulnerable people and you are compassionate, you would say yes to this and you would advocate strongly for them.
Right.
You know, I think as Democrats, we have to come up with a plan, and then we have to focus on that, and we have to stop falling for the bait. In fact, I have a friend in Congress, the first trans woman, who was constantly targeted by the press in some of these trans votes. And when she was asked about sports and trans people, she said, I guess I don't understand how this is lowering costs for people in Delaware. We have to do better. We have to pass our legislation on supporting families, on making sure we're protecting vulnerable people, on making sure all of the things that are being threatened here in New Jersey, like as I've heard, having, you know, some Moms for Liberty type person go out on soccer fields and try to check 7th grade girls' soccer teams for trans people. This is ridiculous. It's not our state. It's targeting vulnerable people. And quite frankly, it's bullshit. And we have to do better at protecting vulnerable people, but we can't fall into these traps because we're losing. And we need to win on this issue.
I mean, does anyone on the stage support policies that would restrict the ability of transgender people to do these various things that I was mentioning?
Well, you should check their votes and see if they did that or not. That's the only way you really could tell, you know? I mean, everybody's gonna say, yeah, while we up here on this panel. You know that, right? The reality is seriously that we don't have a wave of transgender students playing sports, you know, that they identify with, whatever, in schools. This is something that these people came up with, like the immigrant crime wave. This is ridiculous, right? We ought to be defending human beings no matter how they identify themselves. That our job, I don't know who's in you guys' family, but American families are mixed. We have straight people and gay people in our family, right? We have folks that might be transgender in our families as well. So what do? Not invite them over for Thanksgiving because they say they're gay or they're transgender? It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument. It's a ridiculous fight. Some people are up here saying they support things that they have not supported. That's just a fact. They have not voted for any of these things. They have not come out and said anything about it, but they'll say it now. And I'm going to hold them all to it after this thing is over to make sure when we have our transgender rally, I'm going to invite all of them to be there and support transgender in public on Main Street, not just at the Globe debate.
That was the funniest moment of the debate for me because you have to see the visual of it and Ras Baraka's face while he's saying that. And I have no idea who exactly he was referring to as not supporting trans issues publicly, but supporting it there in the moment at that debate. But I can tell you, Sean Spiller did not look comfortable and Josh Gottheimer did not look comfortable. So, again, I don't know if that's who he was referring to, that they had voted against supporting some trans bills in the past, but that was kind of funny. I think I'm going to wrap up there. We're coming up close to an hour, so I'm going to wrap up. You know what? I'll play you a couple of closing statements. They were almost done with this debate. They talked about the issue of clean water, lead pipes, replacing lead pipes in New Jersey. I think that was pretty much the last question, the last topic. But let me just play some closing statements, and then I will give you my assessment.
Mr. Baraka, you're next.
The real question we need to ask ourselves is, where do we want to be a year from now? Do we want to be weak and scared, or strong and proud? Do we want to be chasing Donald Trump around, or do we want to be building affordable housing lowering the cost of healthcare, building a diverse economy, leaning on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our state, protecting women's right to choose, protecting our neighbors, whether they got here 40 years ago or 40 minutes ago, protecting families, and people that are either gay or straight. We have to be talking about building an economy that sees us all, that includes us all, where everybody gets an opportunity to be a part of the middle class, where they can own homes, where we invest in businesses, small businesses and mid-sized businesses, whether they're black or brown or women. We need to invest in all business in this state. We need to be growing an economy that includes everybody in this room and everybody in this state. We can do that. We have a choice to do that right now. We can choose to go with what we've been doing and get the results that we've been getting, or we could choose to do something different, something exciting, something historical. We can reimagine this state. We got a choice, only one choice, really, only one choice, because there's only two people running for governor up here, all of them and me. Choose Ras Baraka, Democrat for governor, June.
Mr. Phillip, you're next.
It's really unfortunate I have to go after Raz. It's really. Let me start by saying thank you for a great debate and forum. You know, I started this campaign a year and a half ago, and I started it with really a different goal. The goal was to be substantive on policy, very, very detailed, and we've done that. We've rolled out policies that are more comprehensive than anybody else out here. It takes time to do that. And the second thing is we wanted to build a grassroots organization to change the infrastructure here in New Jersey, and we've done that. Now, look, I know that our campaign isn't for everybody because we really speak openly about change in tough conversations. We talk about reforming taxes. We talk about the turnpike widening. We talk about congestion pricing. You have candidates up here that will look at what the polling says and then say, you know what, that's what the public wants to hear, and I'm going to tell them that. And I believe that if you're going to change New Jersey, you really need to lean into tough conversations and be honest with all of you. And so our campaign isn't for everybody. I'll be the first to say that. But if you believe that New Jersey is capable of better, if you believe that it's capable of change, and you believe in substantive policy, then I do think our campaign is for you, and I hope you consider joining it.
So that's the debate. So who's it going to be? Who is going to be the pick to be the nominee to run against a Republican in November this year in New Jersey for governor? Will it be Ras Baraka, Newark mayor, Steve Fulop, Jersey City mayor, Steve Sweeney, former state senator, Mikey Sherrill, Congresswoman, Sean Spiller, New Jersey Education Association president, or Josh Gottheimer, U.S. Congressman? Who will it be? I think I'm going to say Ras Baraka. That's who I think I'm going to say, knowing that he is a declared progressive. But get this, number two, behind Baraka, Steve Fulop. Fulop, another progressive. Third, Steve Sweeney. Fourth, Mikey Sherrill. Fifth, Spiller. Last, Gottheimer. Listen, that's just my opinion. Don't go by me. Do your own research, make your own decisions. But for me, the first three are interchangeable. Baraka, Fulop, and Sweeney can all do the job capably. All six of them are decent people. They're decent candidates from what I can tell. No major controversies amongst any of them. No one that you would look at and go, what the heck is that person doing there? They're only there to try and garner some type of attention to advance their career in podcasting or whatever. There's none of that. I don't see anybody like that. They're all professional people, intelligent people who could probably do the job. So this is a question of who could do the job most effectively for me. And the person I think that could do the job most effectively right now, it could change. They got 2 more debates to go, several months before the election. But right now, from what I see, is Ras Baraka, because he has the fight. He has the tenacity, and he also has something that is missing in politics right now, which is he don't care what you think. His beliefs are his beliefs. He's not mincing words. He's not avoiding certain topics like DEI or LGBTQ because the polls are blowing a different way on those issues. And so when I see that, when I can tell, hey, here's a guy, he's telling you where he stands, and where he stands today is where he was standing 10 years ago, I can respect that. I think it's the same with Sweeney. I think it's probably the same with Steve Fulop, which I don't know him as well, but I don't know if it's the same with the other three. I think they're a little more, will go the way the polls are going. And that's why they got referenced in terms of where they're raising money, how they feel on trans issues, and how they voted on things like the Laken-Riley Act, which Josh Gottheimer voted for the Laken-Riley Act in Congress, which was the act in reference to deporting illegal immigrants from the country. He was one of the few Democrats that voted for that. So again, kind of going the way the polls are telling him to go rather than what he claims he stands on. So that's it. Too much commentary from me. I don't want to even say that much. Let me just give you quickly some pros and cons of the top three that I mentioned. I was asked for pros and cons. The pros for Ras Baraka, I believe that Steve Fulop was right. I think a mayor would be the best choice for governor. A mayor understanding budgets, understanding how things work. And when you're dealing with two mayors, one from Newark, one from Jersey City, those are the two biggest cities in New Jersey. That's pretty good. So he's a mayor. He's a no-nonsense kind of guy, it appears. He's not wishy-washy on issues. He knows where he stands. He doesn't follow the trends. And it appears he has a pretty good track record as mayor of Newark. That's important. I didn't really play a lot of that from the debate, but he cited many of his accomplishments since he's been mayor of Newark. That's his pros. His cons, he's got a connection to Louis Farrakhan. That's a huge con. It's 20 years ago, but I believe it will come up, particularly in the general election. There is apparently a video of him from 20 years ago when he invited Louis Farrakhan, leader of the Nation of Islam, to speak, and Farrakhan was saying some very, very off-color things. I should say maybe on-color, because he was talking about white folks. I mean, he was throwing around cracker and white devil and this, that, and the other thing, and apparently Ras Baraka can be seen on video behind him applauding what Louis Farrakhan was saying. So that's a big con that could hurt him in a general election, 20 years ago or not. The only other con is maybe too progressive, maybe a little bit too leaning hard on the things that he believes in, like DEI. Again, I get it. I appreciate it that he's sticking to his guns on his issues, but you got to read the tea leaves a little bit and know where things are going a little bit. Again, once you get into a general election, that's where these cons are going to hurt you. Not necessarily in the primary, but in that general election. So things like the DEI and the race stuff that he talks about and the equity stuff, it might hurt him a little bit. Steve Fulop, the pros, once again, Jersey City mayor, a veteran, former veteran, a Marine. He seems smart. He's well-informed. And I think he's a little more moderate. He's listed as a progressive, but I think he may be a little bit more moderate than Ras Baraka. His cons, I don't like his kids' names. I don't like his kids' names at all. They're a little too pretentious for me. Jackson, Sage, Stasha, or something like that. Pretentious kids' names. I don't like that. I'm not dragging the kids into it. I mean, I'm imagining him and his wife named those kids. I don't like pretentious kids' names. That's one of his cons. And he got sued. Was it Steve Fulop? I believe it was. He got sued by an aide he fired, but the lawsuit was found to be, or the firing was found to be justified. You have to look this up. I saw it quickly. There was a lawsuit. He had an aide that was from Colombia, and he alleged that his ethnicity was made fun of. Maybe not by Steve Fulop, but by someone who worked in Steve Fulop's office, the office of mayor. They made fun of him eating rice and beans or something like that. It was the only controversial thing that I could find for Steve Fulop. So once again, I bring it to you as a con that could come up in a general election. Who knows? For Steve Sweeney, his pros, he's a South Jersey guy. He's the only guy who is a South Jersey guy. For people who don't know, New Jersey is like two states. You got North Jersey, you got South Jersey. All the other candidates are North Jersey people. They're from North Jersey. Steve Sweeney was born in Camden, went to high school at Pennsauken High School. People who are from New Jersey will know that. So you could assume that perhaps he will be more involved in directing policy towards South Jersey. He did mention during the debate, it'd be real nice to have mass transit in South Jersey, not just New Jersey. They all talked about how bad mass transit is in New Jersey, but Steve Sweeney pointed out we don't even have mass transit, really, trains and things like that, high-speed rail in South Jersey. So he's a South Jersey guy. He has experience because, once again, he served as the state Senate president for a number of years, which is actually the second most powerful person in the state. So he was kind of pretty close to already being governor for a number of years, so that experience will help him. His cons, he's not on a very good terms with the powerful teachers union in the state of New Jersey. This goes back to the pensions and the funding of pensions. They feel like he worked a little too closely with Chris Christie and underfunded their pensions. And so that will haunt him. That will definitely haunt him. When you don't have the teachers unions behind you, you got a real tough time getting elected in the state of New Jersey. Another con, his name did show up a couple of times in indictments of issues in New Jersey. One was Norcross, Donald Norcross, who was a U.S. representative. He's in the U.S. House. He had some sort of a scandal, a funding scandal. He was found innocent, no charges, convicted of no charges on that, but Steve Sweeney's name came up. Steve Sweeney's name came up in another indictment case, which I forget. It had to do with a lobbyist getting paid. There was an accusation that Steve Sweeney picked up the phone. Some politician in New Jersey wasn't paying a particular company, and Steve Sweeney reached out and made it all happen, made the person get paid. Once again, if you want to look that up, I'm doing a horrible job of telling you about it, but I'm telling you that way because it didn't go anywhere. It didn't go anywhere. There was no wrongdoing found in either case in regards to Steve Sweeney. But once again, I'm sure it'll be brought up if he gets into a general election that his name was named in a couple of indictments. That's it. I'm going to wrap it up. The Republican primary, they did have their own debate. I started watching it. They got in the fight 30 seconds in. 30 seconds in, they started fighting over the opening statements. Some guy said, I got attacked. All right? I hope that helps. If you don't mind, episode ran a little bit long. I'm going to end with no music. I'll just say thank you for listening. Comparison Guy Podcast. The primary elections for New Jersey governor will be in June. New Jersey is a closed primary state, which means if you're a registered Democrat, you have to vote in the Democratic primary. If you're a registered Republican, you vote in a Republican primary. If you're independent, you can vote in either. If you would like to change your affiliation, if you're a Republican, you want to change to Democrat, you can do that, but you have to fill out a declaration form, some sort of a party affiliation declaration form has to be filled out and submitted to the proper Office of Elections for whatever your county. Now, you'll have to look and see whether or not you still have time to do that prior to the primary. I got differing answers online. One said you can do it up to the day of the primary. Another said you had to do it 60 days before the primary. So I can't tell you which it is. But that's about as much information as I'm willing to give you. I mean, this is not a show about New Jersey, for goodness sakes. But I hope that helped. I hope that gave you a little taste, as I said, of the candidates running on the Democratic side. And I hope you'll come back for the next episode, which will be more based on what's going on currently in this wonderful country of ours. It's 2 o'clock on a Monday, and I can't even imagine what the breaking news today could possibly be. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.